Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 4 of the Virtual Island Summit. Thank you so much for joining us for this session. On Tuesday, we discussed geothermal energy on islands, and today we build on that conversation as we shift the focus slightly and we explore clean energy innovations and transitions. My name is Michaela Johnson, and I am the project manager here at Island Innovation, joining you from Trinidad and Tobago. Island Innovation is a sustainable development consultancy, and our primary focus is on islands. Our services include events, strategic communications, and capacity building. We are trusted by clients around the globe, and if you're interested in learning just a bit more about our work, please reach out to us using the contact information available in the chat. I am happy to be presenting this session titled Clean Energy Innovation and Community-Led Transitions on Islands. And I'm also thrilled to share that this session is sponsored by the Caribbean Energy Chamber. Absolutely fantastic to have their continued support for important discussions like this one. In this session, you will hear from island leaders and experts from across the world as they break down how clean energy and emerging technologies merge with the innate resilience of island communities through both active community engagement and community-led initiatives, working towards creating a bottom-up shift towards prosperous, sustainable future. Before we begin, you should see a poll appear now on your screen. We'd love to know where you're connecting from and what sector and industry you belong to. While you fill out that poll, I'm going to take a quick look at the chat and see where persons are joining us from. I see we have Spain represented, Virginia, Malta, Scotland, Jamaica, Turks and Caicos. Welcome, everyone. It's absolutely fantastic to see so many islands represented. I invite you to continue making use of the chat function. Introduce yourself, let us know where you're joining from, and of course, make any comments during this session. Please also make sure that you use the Q&A function for any questions that you might have for our panelists, and we will do our best to address as many of them as possible when we get to the Q&A section. All right, let's take a quick look at the poll results to see who we have in the room with us. I see we have a large representation from Europe, followed by North America and the Caribbean, South and Central America, Indian Ocean, and Asia also present. Welcome. And in terms of the sectors represented, private sector, government, NGOs, academia, welcome everyone. And thank you once again for being here. At this time, I will now hand you over to Melanie Chen, your moderator for this session. Melanie, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Michaela. Good afternoon, good morning from wherever you are. I'm Melanie Chen, Chair of the Caribbean Energy Chamber, also known as CEC, and we are very pleased to be participating in this important panel at the Virtual Island Summit 2025, who we thank for organizing this session. Some quick background. CEC is a non-profit organization with an objective to help ensure affordable, net zero energy security for the Caribbean, and to also carve out a space in global policy to increase awareness to the challenges facing the region. For example, more frequent hurricanes and adverse weather, which disproportionately affects the Caribbean. We have a pan-Caribbean board made up of various important key stakeholders from both the supply and demand side to help the region implement its energy transition. We are therefore excited to hear from island leaders and experts from across the world in this important session, especially since we know that the energy transition, which we think embraces both energy efficiency as well as renewable energy, they go hand in hand, and communities are very important in terms of implementing it. Small islands face land constraints and are surrounded by sea, and therefore some of the issues that will be discussed today are renewables, public acceptance, and overcoming NIMBYism, not in my backyard, integrated approaches for energy transitions, and the role of local and regional energy agencies as catalysts. One of our speakers, Federine, who you will hear from later, has published recently an island booklet, and it recognized that islands are all different, and there's not a single one-stop solution. So, in their words, diversity must be recognized and embraced with a holistic, place-based approach, as there's not a single definition of insularity. We will learn today from the various experiences globally, which we hopefully can adopt into pragmatic, affordable solutions for our own particular region. And with that, we have a very esteemed panel of speakers, which I'll introduce in the order they'll speak. Her Excellency, Miriam Dali, Minister of Environment and Energy of Malta, Tom Wills, co-founder and director of Equity Research CIC, Kaleem Shah, director at the US Policy Island Lab and assistant professor at the Biden School of Public Policy, University of Delaware, Christian Galetta, project officer at the European Federation of Agencies and Regions for Energy and Environment, known as FEDERENE, and last, Kakembo Galabutsi Brian. He's the Sustainability Director and co-owner of St. Kazitsu Schools, Namugongo. We'll now hear some comments from Minister Dali. Thank you.
Honorable chairs, distinguished colleagues, island leaders, ladies and gentlemen. It is such a privilege to be discussing with you about how clean energy innovation, community engagement, and local leadership can drive sustainable transitions on islands. As island states, we experience firsthand the challenges of being isolated, but also the resilience of our communities, facing unique vulnerabilities such as limited land, deep surrounding waters, dependence on imported fuels, and sensitivity to climate disruption. Now, these same constraints can, however, act as incentives to catalyze innovation that continues to drive us forward towards a cleaner and a more sustainable future. In Malta, we have made strong progress towards cleaner energy. Power generation emissions are expected to fall by 77% by 2030. We have expanded the use of solar panels, and we currently have one of the strongest battery energy storage schemes for households, and we invested also in large-scale renewable projects through some of the best feed-in tariff agreements. In terms of electricity connection, we are connected to the Italian grid, and works are undergoing on a second electricity interconnection. To ensure security of supply while supporting affordable and clean energy, Malta has been actively exploring floating offshore wind potential within its exclusive economic zone, as well as the potential of floating solar photovoltaics closer to shore. That means within 12 nautical miles from shore. In February 2025, during the World Government Summit in Dubai, I was honored to be appointed chairperson of the Global Council on Affordable and Clean Energy, SDG7. Now, this is a 2-year leadership term that Malta now holds in guiding global action on clean, affordable energy. This council calls governments to cooperate, to innovate, and to deliver energy access and affordability in a rapidly warming world. Through this chairmanship, Malta will strive not only to drive domestic progress, but also to amplify community-led transitions on other island territories by sharing best practices, advising on emerging technologies, and also calling for global solidarity in the energy transformation through aspects that reinforce sustainable living. On this panel, and through the Global Council, we invite all island leaders, innovators, and community champions to join forces and build a network focused on shared policy models for community-led renewable deployments, peer support for emerging offshore technologies, cross-island partnerships for storage, marine innovation, and clean mobility, and also amplifying island voices within global governance to ensure that clean energy remains affordable and locally relevant. As islands transition towards more renewables, grid stability obviously becomes crucial. Island communities from the Mediterranean to the Pacific have the potential to lead the world in resilient, people-centered, clean energy transitions. In Malta, we have learned that technological progress alone is not enough. But for real lasting change, innovation must be rooted in community requirements, guided by people's needs, shaped by local knowledge, and scaled through trust and partnership. Whether it's solar rooftops, energy storage, or offshore renewables, it is the people, our residents, and our local leaders who drive momentum and who can really create impact. Ready to support and elevate community-led island transitions together, we can chart a pathway to a sustainable, inclusive, and thriving future for all island states. Thank you, and I really look forward to the perspectives this panel will bring as we shape the next chapter of island resilience together.
Thank you, Minister, for your great comments. And now we have Tom Wills, co-founder of Energy Equitable Research. Tom, over to you.
Hello there. First of all, thank you very much to Island Innovation and CC for the invite, and also to Melanie and the Minister for setting the scene there. I'm going to focus on one specific question here, social value from renewables, and the role and the importance of securing a fair share in the energy transition. Why is this important? So we're seeing across the globe that wind and solar are making really impressive progress. You can see in the graph on the left here, the progress that we've made and the growth of wind and solar in the global electricity mix. However, electricity is only a portion, around a third in most areas of our energy use. And so although we've made a good dent in our electricity supply, we have, heating and transport and all these other sectors. So we're going to need to see much more growth than we've seen in wind and solar. And unfortunately, from the perspective of a fast energy transition, these types of generation projects do require more space than fossil fueled power plants. So in the case of solar, you might be talking about around 40 times more space for a solar power plant to produce the same amount of power as a natural gas fueled power plant, for example. And in onshore wind, you could be approaching 200 times more space. So there's a kind of compounding effect here of rapid growth in renewables, us needing to see much more growth, and these projects occupying more and more space, and often, in quite close proximity to populations. So at Equitable Energy Research, we believe that as renewables expand, finding ways to retain value in host communities is going to become increasingly important. And we're already seeing this around the world with the pushback against net zero and against climate actions, because people are not perceiving that this is essentially in their interest. So Equitable Energy Research is a community interest company that was set up last year to focus specifically on this question. So we conduct research into international best practice examples of community ownership, participation, and benefit from energy projects. We work with communities, project developers, and government agencies to develop initiatives that deliver a fair share of value for all parties. And we publish information and provide advice that supports communities and the public to develop their understanding of the energy sector. And my slides today are based on a recent piece of work that we did looking at energy developments across the Highlands and Islands of Scotland in particular. Here you can see that area of Scotland and the three island groups, Shetland, Orkney, and the Western Isles here. And you've also got the Inner Hebrides to the south. Across this area of Scotland alone, so these are Highlands and Islands totals rather than Scottish totals, we've got around 5 gigawatts of operational onshore and offshore wind capacity, and these are the predominant forms of renewables here. You won't be surprised to learn that we don't have a massive solar industry, and wind has also eclipsed hydroelectric now in Scotland. So these are the main technologies that we're talking about in our jurisdiction. But as I mentioned, the same dynamics are going on with solar and other renewables as well. So 5 gigawatts operational, another 5 gigawatts coming, and over 20 gigawatts in the pipeline. Now, not all of that may necessarily be built, But, you know, if you think renewables are a little bit controversial at the moment, wait until the total installed capacity doubles and then doubles again. We're already seeing pushback in places like Shetland, where I live, and also in the Highland region here, where we have some of the highest densities of onshore wind projects. And as somebody, you know, at Equitable Energy Research, our view is that we would like to see, you know, a lot of this, if not all of it, get built, because we need these projects. They're required for us to decarbonize. But, you know, our concern is that if we don't find ways of retaining a fair share of value in host communities, it's going to be increasingly challenging to secure democratic and community consent for these projects. So there's a accelerating scale and pace of development. And there's a wide range of different project models out there. Here I've kind of sketched out a spectrum of social value, where at one end of this spectrum you have full community or municipal ownership of the project. So, you know, 100% up to 100% retention of the profits, where this is a common model in some areas of the Nordics. So you have full ownership, joint ventures. I believe Terry Thibodeau's on the call from Canada speaking about energy trusts. There's a range of different models where the community can actually get a stake in one of these projects. And in the UK, we have an established precedent for projects paying community benefit payments based on their installed capacity, typically. So in the UK, the standard thing for onshore wind is £5,000 per megawatt paid into a local community pot. We've been doing some analysis on that. We think it should be a mix of a guaranteed minimum income payment and some element of revenue share, so that there is that income security for the community, but additional value share is de-risked for the developer. If they have a bad year, they don't have to pay so much, and if they have a good year, they're able to share some of the proceeds there with the community. There's a lot of debate going on at the moment in the UK about what's a fair level and whether or not this should be mandated. At the more business as usual end of the spectrum, you have socioeconomic impacts, supply chain and indirect impacts. That could be, well, jobs, infrastructure. And in the pictures I've shown here as an example of an accommodation barge that was towed to Shetland for a construction phase and then towed away again. There are good examples of more best practice socioeconomic impacts, where the developers have partnered with a local municipality or a housing association to co-develop housing that is useful for the construction phase and possibly the operations phase of the project, but it also lasts beyond that to provide legacy housing for the community. So there's a spectrum of possibilities here, and across Scotland and the Nordic regions that we've studied, you see good examples all along this spectrum. The problem is that we're tending, certainly in the UK, to be towards the business as usual end of the spectrum, and that is really fueling the opposition to net zero. So our belief at Equitable Energy is that we need to be dragging this along towards the higher ambition end of the spectrum, depending on the scale of a project and what phase that project is at. It might make sense to be at a different point on this spectrum, but the general point, I believe, stands that a just transition means moving beyond business as usual towards best practice. And that's going to be increasingly critical, particularly in democratic societies where community and democratic consent is likely to be a major, if not the major, brake on developments. Where I live in Shetland, we have a prime example of the different ends of the ownership spectrum here. So we host what would be the most productive wind farm in the UK by output if it wasn't so heavily curtailed by the lack of grid capacity. And we have a project around 100th the size, so 4.3 megawatts versus 443 megawatts. That community-owned project in the bottom left returns about the same amount of value to the northerly portion of one island in Shetland as this commercially owned project does to the whole of Shetland. So despite being 100th the size, the value returned to the community is of a comparable level. So quite a stark example. And in our work across the Highlands and Islands, we found, similar examples in every one of the 6 local authority areas in the Highlands and Islands. So the examples are out there, and there is nuance here. You can't always do a Garth wind farm. Some of the projects are going to be more like the Viking model. But as I said before, I think we need to be dragging things in a more ambitious direction if we want to retain community and democratic consent. And as the scale and pace of renewable development increases, the need to do this is going to be ever more critical. We're seeing this across the globe, people questioning the net zero agenda, calling it a con, places like Shetland with exceptionally high fuel poverty rates, and their, pensioners wiping the condensation off their poorly heated homes and looking at one of the largest wind farms in the country that's currently, being paid often not to generate. So this is a thing that we need to fix if we want to get the energy transition over the line. And you're seeing governments increasingly placing greater focus on this. Both the Scottish and UK governments are doing so. And I think, on a more positive note, and it's great to see the number of people on the call here today. We firmly believe that to innovate locally, you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. You can replicate what others have achieved in other jurisdictions. I'd be really interested to hear from anyone on the call who would like to know more about our work or to identify any opportunities for collaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom, for a very, very informative presentation. And now we're going to turn to Kaleem Shah from the University of Delaware. Kaleem, over to you.
Thanks so much, Melanie. Okay, so Christian will put my slides up. Thanks everyone for joining us. I'm very happy to be here with you, with the Island Innovation team once again. My name is Kaleem Shah. I'm a professor of energy and environmental policy at the University of Delaware. Here I run a center called the Island Policy Lab. We've been working specifically on sustainable development issues in island regions, mostly the small island developing states. We've been doing that since around 2021. I tend to say that we are at the science policy interface. So a lot of the work that we do actually has to do with energy security and energy transition, but sort of from a policy angle, institutional building, legal and regulatory analyses, policy design, implementation, and so on. So we try to take all of the wonderful science and new technologies that colleagues are working on and try to figure out how we best design and implement policies and institutional capacity to drive these things forward. So we do a lot of work with the National Science Foundation, with the NREL labs here in the US. But we also do quite a lot of work regionally in the Caribbean with the Inter-American Development Bank, for example, with the American Chambers of Commerce and their efforts on ESG, including energy efficiency and so on. So we do quite a bit of work in region as well and in other island contexts. So I'll just quickly go through a couple of things that we've observed sort of from our little research vantage point. And some of it, I think, dovetails into the experiences that Tom just mentioned as well. So what have we seen happening in the island regions? Well, first of all, sort of on the state of play of where community scaled renewables are. And basically, we talk here about sort of solar and wind primarily, although that's not the only. Those are not the only technologies available. But we do see, of course, most island regions have abundant resources across most of the islands. Several islands actually have not done resource assessments for wind yet. And we're also doing some work with NREL around that, for example. We also do see some weaknesses still. High capital costs, as you know, limited domestic financing, sometimes limited technical workforce, especially for operations and maintenance of projects. And projects are often donor-driven and not necessarily integrated into national plans and NDCs and so on. So, you have a lot of very interesting fires being burnt right around the place, but sort of less of an integrated approach to know where exactly we are along this transition S-curve, as we would say, right? Opportunities, of course, there's lots of falling PV battery costs, onset of more available and accessible things, technologies, smart meters, and so on, digitalization. So there's a lot of potential here for decentralized energy innovation. Threats that we see, along with some that Tom mentioned, along sort of more of the sociopolitical lines, but we also see sometimes decentralized utility resistance to prosumer-led models, um, some amounts of inequity in some places, where we often find wealthier households are able to benefit more from things like rooftop solar. So we need to look at that. Maybe I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few more slides. I'll talk about sort of the three institutional models for community projects that we see very relevant for SIDS countries, particularly the small island developing states, and a few examples of where we, my shop, we've been intervening and doing some analysis with the partners and colleagues on the research side. So the first model is the community energy cooperative type model, which was also mentioned already. So maybe this is a little bit of an elaboration on that, right? So these are owned and managed by members of the cooperative. And there are some advantages of this. There's strong local buy-in, profits stay in the community, and they're scalable with high member or prosumer participation. Typically, we're talking about rooftop solar, community scale solar, sometimes storage, and they can or cannot, sometimes they're linked to the main grid, but they don't have to be. Challenges that we see, they require strong social cohesion within the community. There's high upfront capital costs, and they work best, of course, when there's a very supportive legal and regulatory environment. One of the newer projects that we've been looking at and intervening with is the Barbados Cloud Solar Project. And maybe some of you have already heard about it. So it's a community of virtual solar cooperative model that allows residents to invest in rooftop PV. Now, you don't actually have to be a resident to invest in this virtual cooperative model, right? But so cooperative members purchase what we call solar shares. Outputs are tracked by a digital platform. But again, there's a very supportive environment here with the net metering and feed-in tariff policies. So that makes this more feasible and more attractive to purchasers of solar shares. The cooperative structure reduces entry barriers to some extent. And as I said, even you can purchase the solar shares even without a rooftop, if it was, without skin in the game, so to speak. So that's one interesting model happening. And there are many other examples, right? But this is one that we've been involved in that I can speak a little bit more to. The second model we have is the Community Energy Trust. And I think I saw some messages in the chat before we started on wanting to know more about these. I do have, sorry, next slide, please. Christian, I'm speaking and the slide didn't change. There we go. Trusts, excellent, thank you. Yeah, the Community Energy Trusts. So here the assets are held in trust on behalf of the community by usually a board, an elected board, or what have you. Revenues can be reinvested in social services, so anything from schools, health clinics, social services, things of that nature. The community can reinvest, or through the board, through trusts can reinvest in the community itself. This integrates energy with broader development goals, and it integrates an equitable benefit sharing through the trust to the community. So those are some, the advantage of that. Still some challenges here. Governance capacity. Very much what we've seen are the trusts need at least 5 years of capacity building from donors, the NGO support as well. Sometimes national trusts as well can help set these energy trusts up. But we do see, and this is sort of part of my work, we do see that communities do need sort of the governance support to get started, set up legal frameworks and governance frameworks and so on, but also with a lot of operational aspects of operating these projects. And these projects tend to be a little bit larger, solar hybrid systems, sometimes with even centralized microgrids. I wanted to sort of spread the joy and go to the other side of the world with an example that we've been involved in, which is in Vanuatu. And this is an example of a community energy trust, community-driven rural electrification model. It combines solar and wind with community utilities for off-grid power. And this project, where it works, and this is actually in a very small village of about 250 people, depending on the time of year that you go there. But how it works is there's a small scale solar with battery and a mini grid for schools and the community gathering place. The structure that the community gathers for community activities and council activities and so on. Households use portable LED lamps, recharged at the powerhouse. And the interesting piece of this model is this recharge approach is sort of very, very similar to what the community would have experienced when they had to replace their kerosene, right, for the kerosene lamps. So behaviorally, sort of, it's just sort of almost a transition in sort of that daily behavior between, getting your next container of kerosene or going to recharge your LED lamps, right? So it's quite interesting. It's a pay-as-you-go fee for recharging. And all of this is run through the existing local village council, so to speak, right? There's another name for it, but I can't recall it right now. The yeah, right. Where the community energy councils are set up almost sort of as a subcommittee of the existing village council. So again, you sort of have that continuity and sort of the legitimacy of it and the buy-in from all of the community. So that's an interesting one. The third one, before my time runs out, is one that we are a little bit more familiar with. This is the municipal or NGO-led microgrid type approach. And this is typically a larger project, community microgrid. There's islanding capability oftentimes, demand side management, initiated usually between local governments and NGOs and local communities. Risks, yeah, are sort of always the continuing dependency on external funding, I think. O&M capacity might also be limited. And sometimes tariff setting, we've seen, especially in this example in Puerto Rico, it could be a little bit more politically sensitive as well. This project was is the Casa Pueblo, in association with a number of business partners. And what they did here, this is a very much larger project, for example, much larger than the Vanuatu project. This is approximately 18,000 residents, right? It's run by a non-profit, the association. It literally runs like an independent utility. There's a rate setting where the businesses pay about 25 cents a kilowatt hour, which is about 10% cheaper. So that's a big benefit to business, small businesses there. The revenues are covering the operations and maintenance so far. And they're reinvested into more community solar projects with priority for houses of the most vulnerable in that 18,000 resident community. So that's been working well. And my last wrap up, Melanie, is sort of where we go from here with these three models, especially in the small island developing country context. So now we know we're thinking about scalability of these kinds of projects, and also kind of the contextual fit, right, and the demand and needs and so on of communities. I think also the next horizon is how we integrate not just these renewable projects, community projects, or how we expand and scale them, but how we connect them to other sustainable development objectives regarding food security, water security, sustainable economic growth and livelihoods, and so on. So that sort of is the next stage that we're also looking at, sort of trying to do multiple things at the same time. And I'll stop there, but lastly, some of the interesting, if you're into sort of research at the community RE level, some of the things that we see on the horizon that we're very much working towards would be this behavioral change kinds of science and integrating that into the prosumer mindset, right, of how communities operate these projects. Of course, financing, and then the governance aspects as well, to make these things run effectively. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks, Melanie.
Thank you very much, Kaleem. A very, very rich presentation, and we have a lot of content, so it's very difficult to compress it, but thank you. We now have Christian Galetta from Federine. Christian, over to you.
Good afternoon or morning to everyone. I'm not sure where you are, depending on where you are from. I am sharing the slides now. 1 second. And I will try to also stick to the 7 minutes presentation as the time. I'm sure we are running out of time very quickly. So, can you see the screen?
Hi, Christian, yes, but it's not on presentation mode, if you would mind to...
Yeah, I'm trying to... Now, can you see it now, presentation mode?
Yes, but if you click on slideshow on the menu, then you should see to run on presentation mode.
I'm seeing it in presentation mode.
I think that you are sharing the wrong screen then. We see the minimized file. Can you start sharing again? Still not on presentation mode, Christian.
Yeah,
If you're on Windows, can you press the F5 button?
Yeah,
there you
can
go.
you see it now? Yeah, exactly. It wasn't charging. Okay, so Christian Galetta here, working from Brussels. So I'm not representing an island specifically, although I'm coming from Sicily, the biggest Mediterranean islands in the Mediterranean, indeed. And here I'm working at Fedaren. So quickly introducing the content of today, I will speak about what Federine is doing, our Islands College with our members, and then I will share some lessons learned from the ILET project involving specifically some islands. So very quickly, Fedaren is the European Federation of Regional and Local Energy Agencies. It was established in 1990, so kind of 35 years ago, and ironically now has more than 90 members all around more than 24 European countries. I'm sharing this because among these 90 members, we also have 15 Island College members. So members that are either based on islands or working in projects directly with islands. And here is just a quick overview with a map to help you figure out where we are from. Islands College, because as mentioned many times, islands have unique challenges and opportunities, not due to their dimensions. And indeed, the key point here is how good they are and how skilled they are at also tackling holistically both the energy and the climate adaptation side based on their peculiar needs. One of the work that we have done in our island college, apart from connecting the European institutions with our members and doing the advocacy work, we also produced recently a booklet, a publication, and where you can see a political editorial where we explain a bit in this one pager what are the key points for us for the islands and why they are important to advocate for within the European Union. And also we shared 6 of our members' best practices. As you can see, they go from resilience and adaptation through smart infrastructure, water autonomy. I highly encourage every one of you who is interested in downloading this booklet to go through it. And I put the link at the end of this presentation when it will be shared. Apart from our advocacy work, we also have various projects specifically on islands. One is the Green Island Project, which is aiming at deploying a renewable energy, renewable hydrogen valley in the island of Mallorca, which is there. The Crete Energy Valley, which, as the name says, aims to deploying a renewable energy valley lab in the island of Crete, which is there. And then the Islet Project, trying to deploy 3 energy communities in small Mediterranean islands, and from there building other 4 and then replicating the process afterwards. And it's about this project whose pilot countries are indeed Croatia, Italy, and Greece, that I'm going to speak about to share some of the insights. First of all, so Islet indeed trying to establish these renewable energy communities, but I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with this topic, although it was mentioned earlier. So I will give also a quick overview of what we mean. There is not a specific, a single univocal definition of what we mean by energy communities, but in general, energy communities are based on 2 main pillars. So the idea of fostering the sustainability, the energy transition, and at the same time fostering democracy with the democratic participation of citizens. And imagine a community with different stakeholders, can be citizens, can be also businesses, local municipalities, gathering together, forming a single entity, and then purchasing, deploying renewable energy, and at the same time consuming that energy or selling it. So basically becoming prosumers, from consumers to prosumers, producing and also consuming or selling. Again, there is not a single definition, but why is it important? Who needs these renewable energy communities, specifically in the European context? It's basically the European Union. Through renewable energy communities, we can fill the financing gap for the energy transition by mobilizing citizens' finance. Citizens themselves benefit from the affordability point of view and also the independence in case because they start owning the infrastructure that produce the energy they need. Energy utilities also, because if more citizens are engaged actively in the production of energy, of renewable energy, at the same time, the social acceptance of the technologies increases. And also municipalities and regions, because the whole thing is also bringing the energy expertise into locally to the communities, and this is an empowerment from the municipal point of view. So let's describe very quickly our Islet project in PILS. So aiming at deploying renewable energy communities in small Mediterranean islands, specifically 7 renewable energy communities, 3 in pilot islands, and then 4 in other test islands. The model will be then replicated into 30 replication islands, training 30 local authorities, improving the knowledge in general, the broader knowledge of 70 small islands. So I hope that between the participants, this presentation will be useful for you to get an overview of what we are doing and engaging at least 500 citizens in this, and also creating these 5 help desks at the EU level to support the local authorities. Those are the beautiful islands that are the pilot ones for our project. And I will, bearing in mind the time, I will not go through any one of them. I combined some lessons learned for all of them, but I will simply share with you mainly the more combined the lessons learned, again, the insights for each of them. So Astipalea, Greece, then we have Shres in Croatia. In this specific island, we had some issues because the legal national framework were misaligned and unclear, and the specific model that was chosen, the cooperative model, was excluded from the national legislation, and the community couldn't kickstart because of this. We also had some issues in the infrastructure ownership and some in terms of bottlenecks. And nonetheless, for instance, in Astipalea, the local the strong connections and relationships between the citizens and the community and the local authorities was a key pillar for kicking off the community. The facilitators needed to build trust with one-to-one engagement, communication with local communities, and that was very important. Also to prevent conflict. So conflict management was another part essential in building this renewable energy community. And indeed, always bear in mind that complex procedures in terms of admin and in Europe, we know it very well, may delay also the project. In Procida, indeed, the strength, the participatory design strengthened the legitimacy of the project, and the local facilitators managed to build the trust and overcome these barriers. In Europe, we also have the Sustainable Energy Action Plans, and basically aligning this renewable energy community within these Sustainable Energy Action Plans is an additional layer and leverage to indeed align with the policy making process of the European Union. So to sum up some key insights for you that may be relevant from our islet project in implementing renewable energy communities on islands, I would say 4 main ones. First one is that renewable energy communities can serve as a living testbeds for policy reform. So learning from the challenges, the best practices, the barriers in each of the different countries and legislations then feeds into the European policy making in a project policy feedback loop. So it's very important that we collect this input and we advocate for them at the European level. The local trust and the facilitation in general are critical, essential. So there needs to be a clear facilitation process and a clear engagement of the communities. National renewable energy communities laws in Europe are fragmented, and this leads to administrative complexities and delays. And the last point is that speaking about renewable energy communities to communities is very broad, and it's more important to scale the actions by, for instance, to pilot actions by, for instance, implementing a PV plant on a school. So that's it. Thank you very much for your time. And in the presentation, you will find the publication and more information from the project.
Thank you very much, Christian. And it was very good to have a European island perspective, because, we think about islands like the Caribbean, the Pacific. So it's very good to get the European perspective. We now have Kakembo Galabutsi from Uganda. So this is now an African perspective on island challenges for communities and rolling out renewable energy. So Kakembo, over to you.
Hi everyone. My name is Kakembo. I'm from Uganda. Coming from academia. I will share my slides from a different screen here. We'll figure this out. Yes, let's go. Yes, can everyone see my slides?
Yes.
Nice. So, like I introduced myself, I'm from St. Kizito Schools in Namgongo. We are the very first schools in the country to 100% integrate climate education, renewable energy education, and environmental education within our mainstream curriculum. And therefore, we are the only school that is having 2 separate curriculums run on a daily basis. And this green education, or what we call the greening of education, that second half of the curriculum that we're running, is mostly practical, and we're introducing green technologies to students. And so they have a chance to have a hands-on interaction with most of these technologies. For this presentation, I will definitely focus on renewable energy education and how we expose our kids to technologies. So like the theme of this presentation is about clean cooking and how we get islands to adopt, communities to adapt to these clean cooking technologies. We have seen that there's a very big gap in the workforce that we have in most of the African countries, but it's even worse with island communities. I come from Uganda, and Uganda is a landlocked country, and shockingly, one of the landlocked countries that actually has islands. So we have the biggest lake, Lake Victoria. It's part of it is in Uganda, and in Lake Victoria we have the islands, Sese Islands, which are about 54, or some say 55, because there's some islands that we're disputing with Kenya. And one of the biggest problem that is causing unemployment across, be it the mainland or in the islands, is that there's a mismatch between the skills we get in schools and what is actually needed right now. Because there's a very huge shift in our economies, right? Most of the jobs that are coming up right now are mostly sustainability jobs, right? And so we have so many of our young people still stuck with the skills that they get from school that don't match what is needed. And we have like many startups coming up in energy, renewable energy, for example. And you find that an electrical engineer comes out of school yet they don't even know how to install a solar panel on the roof. They don't even know how to maintain a solar panel, or even to repair one if anything goes wrong. And so what our school is trying to do is then go back and fix that gap. And so how are we fixing that gap? One, we have dedicated 2 hours a day on green skills. And under the green skills, like I mentioned, there's a focus on renewable energy education. And therefore we have different forms in which we display this. And the second way we do this is to bring demonstration projects. How we do this is to bring demonstration projects into the school. So we set up solar appliances or like solar technologies within the school. And then the kids have to interact with this. How does this solar panel look like? How does it operate? How do I connect this solar panel? How do I even size to know that this is the type of solar system I need for this purpose, right? So that level of interaction. Then we set up a mini hydro dam, very miniature, using a water stream in school, so that the kids know this is the actual technology behind a hydropower plant, so that they just don't see a foreign concept thinking, oh, electricity comes from very complex processes, but yet the processes they can learn. And we're using materials that are in the I would like to demonstrate through a video on how then we bring the community to get engaged in this. So let's watch. Yes. So that there is our way of interacting with the community. So once we bring these technologies, is the presentation shifting? I'm trying to see if everyone is on board. Well, yes. So yeah, so the video you just saw is an expo that we hold every year annually, and it brings over 5,000 to 6,000 visitors. And that is a way for us to showcase what we're doing in the school, but also to bring the community to get involved. Not only just the students, but the students show the community that these are the options that we have. These are the clean technologies that we have. These are the, this is how we integrate renewable energy in agriculture. This is how we integrate renewable energy in let's say clean cooking. This is how you integrate renewable energy in the aspects, in different other aspects of the economy. So it's our way to interact with the community and then bring them on board when it comes to renewable energy education. Another solution that we have is to engage the Ministry of Education and other public organizations so that we push for the change of the curriculum. And this, we succeeded. We joined our fellow educators to ensure that the curriculum changes from a completely theory-based curriculum to a now new curriculum that requires every school to have practical lessons on different aspects. Many schools are still choosing the easier practical skills like tailoring, but we are trying to push as much as possible to encourage most of the schools to have greener skills, skills in renewable energy, skills in smart agriculture, skills in circular economy, all that. But of course, it's a step-by-step process.
I think Kimbo.
I think he is experiencing connection issues.
Well, anyway, it was a very, very interesting presentation, and it shows a very how much progress he's been doing in his region, which is very, very inspiring. We're almost out of time. There was a couple of questions on the Q&A. One was about community energy trusts, and I think Colleen touched on that. So I think if you want more information, please reach out to Colleen. There was also a lot of chat about wave power, and I think Tom answered it quite eloquently that, it has been researched. At the moment, the wave power is coming in higher than wind and solar, so it looks like it's less commercial. But given that we have a couple of minutes left, what I would like to do is ask the panel if they want to give us one key takeaway. What would be the main catalysts or action that they think could help scale up community acceptance of renewables, the energy transition, energy efficiency? So I'll give them each 30 seconds to do it. And I'm just going to do it in the order of the speak. So Tom, do you want to kick off?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's really encouraging to hear almost, I think, every other speaker touching on the same point, really. For me, it boils down to, well, a question of who benefits from the resources of a place. And, if we want to get a fast energy transition, it needs to be fair. Otherwise, people are going to push back. And we're seeing that, and everyone has touched on that. So I hope off the back of this meeting, we can get some collaborations going between some really interesting geographies. Thank you.
Kaleem.
Well, thank you very much. I'll be a little quick. I put in something in the chat there on this thought in case we didn't have time. But really quickly, I think the basic point here that everyone's getting at, And you have to ensure that even in the conceptualization stage of these projects, you have genuine and authentic co-creation with the communities, right? Project developers and communities, very early getting together on this. It helps a lot. The other thing I sort of understand now is that very different from a lot of the economic modeling literature. Communities, because especially where we work in islands, right? They're very, very unique and different cultural and sociocultural and behavioral contexts. And, not everyone is necessarily a benefit or a profit maximizer, right? There's a number of different imperatives and drivers of why communities move into community level RE projects. So a lot of sort of our modeling of things like project feasibility and sustainability of projects moving forward has to consider those things as well when we check things up. It's not sort of only about sort of the dollars and cents piece of it as well. Thanks.
There's a human community element, totally fully understood. Christian, and then hopefully we'll get Kakimbo, at least verbally, but Christian, you had a great spectrum from across European islands.
Yeah, I will build from what also the other speakers have said. It's about stakeholders engagement. The point is not what, but I would say it's how. That's the most important thing, because sometimes in many projects we see stakeholders engagement as something that is just a box to tick and in a specific phase of the project. So we would like to stress the importance of enforcing a stakeholders engagement throughout the project in all the phases, from the co-designing until the implementation and after the project is handed as well as finished, because that's a way to integrate it in the community. So it's not just for social washing. There should be it's important to really listen to what the community says.
There's an integral part of the process. And I think, Kakimbo, I don't know if you can hear us, if you want to give anything from your perspective, but we understand you do have some, go ahead, Kakimbo.
Yeah, it's good. I think my focus will be mostly on education. We need to educate all the stakeholders and ensure that they do understand. One, they do understand, they are aware, and then two, they also, I think, to have knowledge of the availability of the options, but then also to understand how to use the options, and then to also demystify the different maybe negative information that they get across the internet and also from from the people who are against clean energy. And so that is really crucial. Renewable energy education is really, really crucial. And this can come from all the way from the schools. And then also we can have direct programs that target the community stakeholders that are not in schools.
Great. I think we all agree in starting early education is very important. So with that, I think I'm going to end this session. We're slightly over time, but it was great to get a parallel from Africa, from Scotland, from the European Union, from America, including some of the Pacific Islands, because the panel had a great depth and spectrum of expertise. And so I thank them very much for their time and their time for putting together the slides and the information. So thank you very much also to VIS for hosting this. And Michaela, I think it's over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Melanie. And of course, I want to express your same sentiments. Thank you to our panel, very, very diverse panel with many different regions represented. And I think I definitely appreciated all of the different perspectives, and I'm sure that the audience would agree as well. Before you go, please allow me to share a quick announcement with you. During the opening session of the VIS on Monday, Island Innovation announced that we are partnering with the Cabildo of Gran Canaria to host the Global Sustainable Island Summit 2026. This is our flagship in-person event, and after this year's experience in St. Kitts and Nevis, now the Macaronesian region and Europe will take the spotlight. The summit will begin from April 20th to the 23rd, 2026, and we will be discussing solutions and advancements in sustainability. Please note that all attendees of this virtual summit can get an additional discount on early bird tickets, and there's a special coupon code that's being shared with you now in the chat. Our next session for today is titled Sustainability and Governance, Transformative Leadership in Subnational Island Jurisdictions, and that will start in just under an hour. We'll see you all there. Thank you.